The story of the American West is carved in legend. It's a story of dust-caked heroes and shadowy villains, of chaotic boomtowns and vast, unforgiving landscapes. We all think we know how the final chapters for its most notorious figures were written. Showdowns at high noon, fatal poker games, and the swift justice of a lawman's bullet. These are the endings we've been told, the tales that turned mortal men into immortal legends. But what if those endings are the greatest tall tale of them all? What if the most famous deaths in the Wild West weren't conclusions but carefully constructed deceptions? We all know the stories of how men like Jesse James and Billy the Kid met their end, but the official accounts are far from the whole truth. Tonight we're exposing the conspiracies and the untold stories that suggest these infamous outlaws met a far stranger and more mysterious end than anyone has ever imagined. Let's start with a death everyone thinks they know. Deadwood, Dakota Territory, 1876. James Butler Hickok, better known as Wild Bill, sits in a saloon. Famed for his lightning-fast draw and steely nerve, he was a man who always faced the door. But on this day, for the first and last time, his back was exposed. A drifter named Jack McCall sneaks up behind him and puts a bullet in his head. The cards in Hickok's hand, aces and eights, would become an instant chilling legend, the dead man's hand. So what was the motive? The official story paints it as a simple, drunken grudge. McCall himself claimed he was avenging his brother's death, though it's a mystery if his brother was even killed by a lawman, let alone Hickok. It all seems straightforward, a tragic but simple end for a complicated man. But when you look closer, something more sinister crawls from beneath the surface. Hickok wasn't just a gambler. He was a renowned lawman and a former Union spy, a man whose very presence could bring order with the barrel of his gun. In a lawless boomtown like Deadwood, overflowing with gold and controlled by powerful gambling bosses, a man like Wild Bill wasn't a hero, he was a threat to business. Some historians argue that a shadowy group of these saloon and gambling kingpins may have put a price on his head to protect their illicit profits. The conspiracy deepens when you examine what happened after the shooting. McCall was first acquitted by a makeshift miners' court in Deadwood, a verdict so absurd that federal authorities refused to recognize it. U.S. Marshals promptly arrested McCall, took him to Yankton, the territorial capital, and retried him. This time, he was convicted and hanged. Some researchers believe this was the entire point. By retrying McCall, the federal government was forcefully establishing its legal authority over the wild, untamed Black Hills. In a stunning discovery, one local historian found that 2 pages from the U.S. Marshal's official ledger, pages covering correspondence in the weeks right after McCall's execution, were suspiciously torn out. Was Wild Bill's death not a simple murder, but a pawn in a much larger political game? A calculated sacrifice to tame the frontier? Suddenly, the neat story of a card game gone wrong completely unravels. Few names are as legendary as Jesse James. He was hailed by some as the Robin Hood of the West, a former Confederate guerrilla who led his gang on a spectacular spree of daring bank and train robberies. To others, he was just a cold-blooded killer. His death is as famous as his life. Betrayed by Robert Ford, a member of his own gang, who shot him in the back of the head as he straightened a picture on the wall, all for a handsome reward. It seemed like the age of the outlaw died right there with him. But what if it didn't? What if the man Robert Ford shot wasn't Jesse James at all? It sounds like a tall tale, but this theory has stubbornly persisted for over a century. It suggests that Jesse, weary of life on the run, staged his own death with the help of a man named Charlie Bigelow, who was killed in his place. This would have allowed the real Jesse James to simply vanish and live out his days in peace. It seems far-fetched until you hear about a man named J. Frank Dalton. In 1948, a 100-year-old man in Lawton, Oklahoma, came forward with a shocking claim. He was the real Jesse James. He wasn't the first imposter, but Dalton was different. He had an answer for everything. He knew stunningly intimate details about the James gang, and his body was a living roadmap of Jesse James's known injuries. He had rope burns, badly scarred feet, and more than 30 bullet wounds, including the telltale wound near his right eye, another in his abdomen, and even a missing fingertip, all matching injuries the real Jesse was known to have sustained. The claim gained so much traction that a court was petitioned to legally change Dalton's name to Jesse James. Though the judge dismissed the case, many were convinced, including some of James's own distant relatives. Then, in 1995, scientists exhumed the body in Jesse James's official grave for DNA testing. The results indicated the remains were, most likely, those of the outlaw. But supporters of the Dalton theory argue the findings weren't conclusive. Persistent questions about the DNA samples and how they were obtained have kept the doubt alive. So did Jesse James die a coward's death in 1882, or did he pull off the greatest hoax of his career and die a free man at the ripe old age of 104? If any outlaw's death is more famous than Jesse James's, it's that of William H. Bonney, better known as Billy the Kid. The official story is iconic. The young, charismatic gunslinger, so famous for his exploits in the Lincoln County War, was tracked to a dark room in Fort Sumner, New Mexico, by the relentless Sheriff Pat Garrett and shot down in the night. Garrett became a hero, the Kid became a tragic figure, and the story became gospel. But from the very beginning, there were problems with Garrett's account. He was the only primary witness, and his version of the story changed noticeably over time. One of his own deputies present that night even claimed the man Garrett shot wasn't Billy the Kid. Why was the body buried so quickly the next day, before anyone from outside could formally identify it? Many believed it was because Garrett had shot the wrong man. Others whispered a more personal theory, that the lawman, who had once been friends with Billy, simply had a change of heart and let the Kid escape into the night. These whispers might have faded into history, if not for an old man in Hico, Texas. In 1948, he decided he wanted a pardon he believed he'd been promised 70 years earlier. His name was Ollie L. Roberts, but everyone called him Brushy Bill, and he claimed to be Billy the Kid. Like Dalton, Brushy Bill knew things only an insider could know, recounting his life as Billy with stunning accuracy. When a skeptical historian demanded proof, Brushy Bill stripped down and revealed 26 bullet and knife scars that allegedly matched every known wound of Billy the Kid. His claim was so convincing that several of Billy the Kid's old friends, who were still alive, signed legal affidavits swearing under oath that Brushy Bill was the man they knew as the Kid. His quest for a pardon led him before the governor of New Mexico in 1950, but the meeting was a disaster. The governor, Thomas Mabry, publicly humiliated the old man and flatly rejected his claim. A heartbroken Brushy Bill died just a month later, yet his story refused to die with him. In later years, facial recognition analysis was performed on photos of the two men, concluding the resemblance was so close they were almost certainly the same person. Even though DNA tests on the supposed remains of Billy the Kid and his mother have been inconclusive due to floods and grave mix-ups, the town of Hico, Texas, remains convinced. To this day, his tombstone there reads not Brushy Bill Roberts, but Billy the Kid. The stories of these men are filled with doubt and intrigue, challenging the very history we thought we knew. If you're fascinated by the secrets of the past, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell, because we're always digging up new mysteries. Let us know in the comments which outlaw do you think might have faked their own death. But maybe the most enduring and romantic mystery of all doesn't belong to a single outlaw, but to a pair, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. After their wild bunch became too notorious in America, the charming mastermind Butch and his deadly fast-draw partner Sundance fled to South America, along with Sundance's enigmatic companion, Etta Place, For years, they tried to go straight, living peacefully as ranchers in Argentina, but the law and their old habits eventually caught up with them. The official story places their end in San Vicente, Bolivia in November 1908. Two American bandits, believed to be Butch and Sundance, were cornered in a boarding house by a Bolivian army patrol. Fierce shootout erupted. When the shooting stopped, authorities went inside and found both men dead. It looked as though one had mercifully shot his wounded partner before turning the gun on himself to avoid capture. But here's the problem. No one ever positively identified the bodies. The only witness to identify them had only ever seen the robbers while they were wearing masks, and crucially, no photos of the corpses were ever taken. The Pinkerton Detective Agency, which had hunted the pair for years, chose to believe the report, but even they were never totally sure. Then, in 1991, forensic scientists exhumed the supposed grave of the two outlaws in San Vicente. DNA testing proved definitively that the remains did not belong to Butch Cassidy or the Sundance Kid. So what really happened? For decades, sightings of the duo persisted across the United States. The most compelling story comes from Butch Cassidy's own sister, Lula Parker Bettinson. She swore on her family's name that her brother came back to their ranch in Utah in 1925. She claimed he lived out the rest of his life under an alias in the Pacific Northwest, dying peacefully in 1937 and buried in a secret, unmarked grave. Others claim a machinist from Spokane named William T. Phillips was the real Butch Cassidy, having written an autobiography filled with details only the outlaw could have known. To this day, researchers are still uncovering evidence, with some claiming to have even found the real, unmarked graves of both outlaws right here on American soil. So, were the deaths of the West's most wanted men neat, tidy endings to violent lives, or were they elaborate disappearing acts? Were men like Jesse James and Billy the Kid clever enough to outsmart not just the law, but history itself? And did Butch and Sundance truly manage to ride off into one final unknown sunset? The lines between fact, fiction, and legend in the Old West are blurred by gun smoke and time. The official stories give us clean-cut heroes and villains, but the secret histories leave us with something far more compelling, an enduring mystery. The final truth of how these men died may be buried forever, leaving us all to wonder if the greatest trick these outlaws ever pulled was convincing the world they were dead.